It's a pleasure to be here again with all of you, to at least virtually meet all of you to our great session on the crucial role of rulebooks. Well, and how to start such a session in those days? Of course, with soccer. Everything you need to play soccer is a ball. I mean, honestly, if we were kids, we all take a ball and then we play soccer. But if it would be important for us, then we would need some rules to play soccer. And if our business runs on the basis of soccer, then we do definitely need rules on this. And of course, we need some guidelines, also some ethical guidelines to play soccer. And the same is for data sharing. When we were kids, we only used an internet connection to share data, and then we used an API, and we had our goals. But today we need more. I will try to share my screen briefly to guide you through the agenda of this session. So what do we have today? We have so many great presenters here today in this session. We have Marko Turpeinen from Finland, CEO of 1001 Lakes, also professor at Aalto University, dealing with digital transformation in the society. We have Giulia Giussani from the IDSA team to present the IDSA rulebook. Marko will present the Zitra rulebook. And then where can we learn better about digital and data ethics than from the medical industry? We have two medical doctors that deal with data as well, and they will give us some insights into data and digital ethics. So as we are a little bit behind the schedule, without any further ado, I would give the floor to you, Marko, to explain us a little bit more about why do we need rulebooks and how does the Zitra rulebook support us here. Marko, floor is yours.
Thank you, Sebastian, and let me just bring up my slides. So here we go. So I hope you can see them. So yeah, my pleasure to be here, and let me start by connecting the name of the company a little bit with the previous discussions and the great presentations that we've had today. So when you have 1,000 members, 1,000 partners, like was the goal for Catena X, and they want to connect their 1001 data lakes. So that's when you get a data space. And that's what we are after. And my claim is that when you create a data space, you also need a rule book. And so it's a very generic concept of, yes, when the data sharing network gets together, it's not enough that we have the common building blocks, we have the technology, we have kind of the ground layer of our common activity, or the kind of the basis of the building that we are trying to do. That's all set, and that's what we are trying to do with things like IDS and Gaia X. But we also need to go all the way to agreeing on how that data network should function together. And that's what these rule books are all about. And let me still go a little bit backwards, kind of explaining the kind of what the trend is, where we are, and why this is so important, and how these systems are connected together. So here I'm borrowing from the paper by Porter and Heppelman in Harvard Business Review, which I think was a seminal paper on kind of, laying out that now we have moved from these, individual products that have becoming more smarter and connected to systems of products, and then these product systems are interconnecting to systems of systems, and that's the story of data spaces. So how do we build these ecosystems? But once they are there, once they are functional, how do you govern them? How do you make sure that these system of systems actually work in a fair and balanced way? So that's why we need rule books. And I also had the pleasure of participating in the work that was referenced a little bit earlier, also by Boris and others, this 3-layer approach, the paper by the Open DEI project called Design Principles for Data Spaces, where IDSA was also coordinating that work, I think was a really a best effort at this point to come up with what's needed for these data spaces, what's needed at the bottom for the soft infrastructure as the common building blocks, what's needed to get these building blocks work together, and add some domain-specific aspects in the middle layer, and then at the top layer, how do you build the real ecosystems based on the common building blocks. And you can take the rulebook approach and use it in several different ways. We will hear about the IDSA rulebook, so kind of what has been done for IDSA itself, and it's more horizontal, and it's more at the, let's say at the lower levels, agreeing that, well, if you are a member of IDSA and you want to use IDS and you want to certify IDS, so these are the rules to follow. So that's one application of rulebook. But I think the main application and the most, in this discussion relevant is that, well, how do we actually have these rule books for every single ecosystem so that they build on top of this kind of layered structure, but then you can go into those specifics of if it's the circular economy network, for example, that we just heard an excellent talk about. So how do you define the rules for that circular economy network? My field, or one of the fields or domains that I've been looking into lately, and then this was something that I also wrote something about for the paper just mentioned, design principles for data spaces, was agriculture. And here is an example illustrating that well, this is the problem that we are trying to solve in a way. So here is one farm in the region of Wallonia, and they have their field, and there are multiple data points that they would collect from their field, and for legitimate reasons there are many parties that might want to get access to that data, and it might be monitoring the crops, tracing where the products are coming from. It might be the public actors, the government actors that want to follow what's going on in terms of the subsidies, for example. There are many reasons why this farmer needs to be able to connect with these different actors, and the reality is that currently most of these require one-on-one agreement between the farmer and then the other party. And you can also imagine that this single farmer might not have the greatest position to be negotiating the terms for the use of the data and so forth. So how can we have a more balanced structure? And for example, here in the region of Wallonia, there is a great initiative called DJust Connect that is trying to, from that region's point of view, and maybe certain kind of farms, to solve the problem. But these embryonic data spaces we see happening, and we need these rules to make things work. Then again, staying in the agricultural domain, there has been great work in kind of figuring out what the code of conduct related to, let's say, fair use of data should be. So this was a couple of years back. Kopa-Kohega came up with this code of conduct document, and I think it's one of the best of breed currently for what needs to be defined for the domain. But this is not enough. So this is for the entire domain, and it's quite broad still, and does not go into specifics of specific use cases or ecosystems, and that's where we need rulebooks. So now I'm also stepping in a little bit for my colleague Juhani Luomakyyn, who couldn't join us today from Sitra, but the story is that Sitra is the Finnish Innovation Fund, and one of the focus areas recently for Sitra has been fair data. So what can we do to make data economy more fair? And one of the activities within that project was the Rulebook project that I'm going to talk about, and us 1001 Lakes were kind of commissioned by Sitra to coordinate that program. So that's why I know the Rulebook thing quite intimately. So anyway, so the idea is to look into, well, what would be needed in terms of rules, in terms of rule books for these data sharing networks, and move from this situation that we need to have these bilateral agreements into one rule book for one network, which might then cover several use cases for that ecosystem. So it's the founding document for the members of that data ecosystem, and they would sign it and adhere to it. So it really is kind of binding document, and typically there is an orchestrator that helps to get the rule book together. Maybe there is a legal entity even that's formed for that network, and it's obvious then that legal entity and that the governance structure of that could include then the building of the rule book. how we have approached this is really that it's not enough to look into the building of such an ecosystem from the technical point of view alone. So you need to have the business view, the legal aspects, the data specific questions and ethical questions all coming together with technical viewpoints to have the comprehensive view on what really is needed for that data ecosystem. And so we have this list of control questions, as we call them, for each of these different areas that are kind of, suggested that the ecosystem goes together and finds answers to, which is then the sort of building blocks for the rulebook itself. And then there are ready-made agreement templates, which are fairly generic. The whole rulebook is very generic, so it doesn't matter whether it's a network of 5 parties or 5,000 parties. The idea and domain specific, no, it's also kind of generic in terms of domains, can be used for any domain. But the agreement side is that there are basic agreements for how do you join such a network, how do you specify different aspects of data usage for different data sets. So you have these templates that are ready to use for that for any data sharing, basically. So it's an open project, openly licensed template as well. So anybody is free to use this, but we also are building an open international community around this rulebook, and you are very welcome to join us to work together with us on this endeavor. But anyway, so that's the point of rulebook. Little bit in more detail still on the checklist. So the number there means how many questions there actually are in the checklist, but you have the business questions like value and utilization of the data, the rights, the governance, you have legal questions, you have the technical side, the infrastructure, obviously for IDS-based rulebooks, so you would assume that many of those technology building blocks, the infrastructure, the common solutions, the core functionality, well, that's given by IDS, and that's great. Then you can just check the point that, well, we just do as it's done with IDS reference architecture, but then there might be additional things. And ethics, we have spent a lot of time recently on kind of the ethical side of this, and I think it really needs to be addressed, and we will hear more about ethics in a moment as well later in this session. Very briefly also, okay, we kind of took a dose of our own medicine here. So Ihan is the name of the project in Sitra. So then we defined a rule book for that Sitra's internal testbed project, or Sitra's testbed project that Sitra is providing, and here just as a kind of a blueprint that what did it take. So we had this interaction with the community of parties that are using the testbed. There was the first draft, then a couple of iterations, checked with the legal team at Sitra that everything is fine, and then the release. And again, so it's not like that you can build this rule book in a day. Typically, it takes a couple of weeks or a month or so to do this properly. But again, I think it's very much time well invested. And so from the generic model that at that point was 76 pages, so we kind of, tuned down to 37 pages of actual contracts and the actual rule book for the testbed. Just an illustration of how this project might run. But here is a concrete example that we also have worked lately. So the story is that there is a Finnish maritime manufacturer, engine manufacturer, Wärtsilä. There is a Nordic bank. There is an insurance company. So how around letters of credit? So how do you come up with a secure system that you kind of also have the data sharing part of this between different parties well established? And it started with the collaboration one-on-one between the bank and the maritime manufacturing company, but then the insurance company joined, others have joined. So typically also that there can be this embryo, this starting point for the network that is using the rulebook, and then over time, so it grows when the members are joining. So just an example of in real life how this has been used for a real business problem, letter of credit handling for this export business of this manufacturing company. Anyway, so that was it from my side. Thanks for listening, and back to you, Sebastian.
So thank you, Marko, for presenting. So this was really not only fair play, this was really interesting, and thank you for the insights into the Zitra rulebook and the reason why do we need rulebooks to set up data sharing in data spaces. Having said this, something that is a little bit complementary, but also using parts of what Zitra has already prepared in such a real good manner, is the IDSA rulebook, which was an endeavor that the IDSA had in the last year to really bring IDS to life. And one important participant in the work, or one of the drivers of the work to build the IDSA rulebook, is my dear colleague Giulia Giussani. She will present you the IDSA rulebook and what's in there and how you can use this rulebook. So, and here in Studio 2, we have to switch now to my dear colleague Giulia.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you today to give you an insight on the IDSA rulebook. So I think we still have to share the screen. Yeah. Now you should be able to see my screen. So what is the IDSA rulebook? Sebastian and Marko already gave a really good introduction to what rulebooks are. And the IDSA rulebook is exactly that. So a document, a set of documents containing all the agreements to manage, operate, and participate in data spaces based on the IDS approach. And actually, these are agreements that are highly crucial for data spaces in a real world scenario. It's not the case, it's not by chance that the IDSA rulebook was published this year, because exactly IDS is making a transition from a research environment to a real life and market readiness scenario. So the IDSA rulebook is highly valuable and is very unique thanks to the IDS approach itself. So as the IDS approach, it's really holistic, and you can find technical agreements to ensure, for example, interoperability, but it also tackles all the legal and operational sides of data sharing. So sticking to these rules, within an ecosystem, we can make sure that trust is there and we can govern it. So this is why we actually call the IDSA rulebook the trust anchor within data spaces based on the IDS approach. You may ask how this fits in different scenarios and different sectors. Actually, Marko's already tackled that a little bit. So the IDSA rulebook is more on the horizontal layer. So with the IDS approach, as you know, and also with the IDSA rulebook, we want to really make sure that data spaces stick to some basic and common principles and stick to the same rules. So this was a very quick introduction. Let me give you an insight on what's really in there. So the rulebook is divided into 4 main sections. We have the functional agreements, technical ones, the operational, and the legal agreements. In the functional agreements, we basically define all the different roles that you can find within a data space based on IDS. You can also find here the definition and the clarification of what we call the essential services. So with this term, we refer to all those services and components that make sure that trust is there in the ecosystem. So for those that are more familiar with the IDS concepts, we are speaking about the certificate authority, the DApps, the PERIs, so the ones that really deal with the identity management, and also everything related to certification. In this section, we also tackle the non-essential aspects. So we define the so-called base services. These services basically define some additional functionality. So for example, data discovery. So we refer to the metadata broker from the IDSA RAM. And we also clarify the so-called clearinghouse. So the element that has the purpose to log all the transactions. In the technical agreements, we basically gather together all the knowledge related to the technical side of data sharing. So here you will find all the specifications and also all the links to the most important documents like the IDS RAM, which is now in its 3rd version. And you can also find here the link to our open source repository, so our link to GitHub. Here, very important part, everything related to the certification process. So you will find here the process itself, so a clear description, but also the link to the certification criteria. Moving to the operational agreements, they are divided into 3 main sections: the governance one, the administration, and the maintenance part. In the governance sections, we've tackled, we have clarified which are the bodies that will make sure that the IDS standard will last also in the future. So we really want IDS to be sustainable in the future. And here we've clarified, for example, the duties and responsibilities of the head office, as well as the one of the working groups, task forces, and executive board. The administration section, this is related to everything for the operationalization of a data space. And in this section, you will find all the rules for the admission, suspension, and withdrawal of new participants, but you will also find here the rules for the approval of the evaluation facilities. So with this term, for those that are not much familiar with the IDS concepts, we refer to those companies that are entitled to assess the components and the participants that would like to step into the ecosystem. So they will be approved by a specific role, which is defined in the 1st section, so in the functional agreements, which is called support organization. So the support organization is basically a body, a 3rd party, which has the responsibility of ensuring that trust is there in the ecosystem and that coordinates all the essential services. This is highly important. So if you are a support organization in a data space, you will take the rulebook and open it up in the in this administration section, and this will be your handbook to really manage all your activities. In this section, you will also find everything related to the incident management. So we've defined which categories of incident are there and who should take responsibility on that. In the maintenance part, we've tackled all the issues related to the versioning. So we've defined how version should be managed. We've also tackled the release management and the change management processes. And moving to the last section, that's the legal agreement section. Basically, in this part, we provide some guidelines and best practices endorsed by IDSA so that companies can really build their own rulebook and set of legal agreements. For example, in here, we link to the CITRA rulebook that Marko already explained, because we think this is highly valuable. And it provides also, as mentioned, concrete tools that you can use to build them up. And this section is definitely very important. Your legal agreements should be adapted according to your needs. Obviously, a data marketplace or a bilateral data sharing needs different types of agreements. But we believe that in cases of multi-party data sharing, these kind of rulebooks and legal agreements play a really crucial role. Yeah, so now we also tackled how we want to support companies to have a compliant collaboration. I think this provides you a really good overview on our rulebook. As you can see, it's version 1.0 that was released, as mentioned, at the beginning of this year, but we are continuously working on it. So this will not stop, and the rulebook will obviously evolve together with the IDS offering. So if you're interested, just stay tuned for that, and feel free to ask questions at the end of the session or reach out to me via email or LinkedIn. Thank you very much. Sebastian, the floor is yours again.
I'm back. Thank you so much, Giulia. So we learned several things. So first, it's do it yourself, both for the Zitra rulebook and also for the IDSA rulebook. It's for you to use it, to implement it. And we learned that it is a process. You have to think about things and you have to settle your agreements. So we are making the blueprint. The rulebooks are the blueprint. You have to use them and to implement them. And as said, as it's a process, you have to think about different aspects. And having said this, I'm happy to welcome, so let me try to, so there is a big man looking angry at me because I look down again to this tiny screen to close it. So I hope Cátia is with us now, Cátia Sousa Pinto. She's a medical doctor and from Lisbon, from Portugal. She will give us some insight into data and digital ethics. And I heard already from Finland, from Marko, 30 degrees there. So Dortmund, Germany, 20 degrees. What has Lisbon to present to us? How's the weather?
Good afternoon, Sebastian. It's very, very good weather right now in Lisbon. I hope very soon you are able to come and see it for yourself. Thank you also for inviting us for this session. It's been very exciting participating and learning and having this different horizontal and multi-sectoral approach to data spaces. So I'll start by sharing my screen. I hope you can see my slides now.
Yes, we can. Now in full screen. So floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So in my presentation, I will focus on a different perspective from the ones I've been listening to. I will focus on how to use rulebooks as a tool for national health data strategies. So in national health services have huge challenges ahead that come from this digital transformation. And so in our perspective, rulebooks also have a very strong role to play, especially when we are dealing on preparing next generation national health service to improve the public's health. Just a brief presentation about ourselves, who we are. We are the shared services in the Ministry of Health in Portugal, and we are the national e-health competent agency. So among other duties, we are responsible for the development and management of national health information systems and the NHS contact center and telemedicine across the country for our network of public hospitals and primary care centers. So we are actually a company that is driven by innovation. We want to be the interface between the traditional and the digital health of the future as a means to disrupt the traditional care delivery models through an accelerated and integrated end-to-end digital health strategy. And this is because we need better solutions to citizens, to health professionals, and ultimately to the entire health ecosystem. We act also as an innovation window between EU and Portugal by fostering our international collaboration effort in several data-related actions and international projects to foster our internal capacity and also to help to build our joint global health agenda. In our country, we have actually developed a strategy called From Big Data to Smart Health, Putting Data to Work for the Public's Health, that it's a data strategy for a next generation national health service. So Portugal has been doing a great progress in the digital transformation of our national health service. We have now a multiple array of health information systems that collect data on people's health throughout the citizen's life cycle. And so we want to transition from this digital national health service to an intelligent national health service that it's actually able to deliver added value to the public's health. By doing so, we as a governmental agency need to make sure we have core solid values in order to ensure, first of all, the public's trust on our commitment to data protection and privacy rights, and also transparency and trustworthiness in the reuse of data in the healthcare sector. We want to make sure we have high quality data to have a comprehensive ecosystem of indicators and data-related services, and this needs a data quality regulatory framework. We want also to achieve efficiency in the healthcare sector, and that can be done and will be in the future mostly done through data integration, ensuring interoperability and data warehousing, and also to allow health professionals, citizens, and policymakers to have a complete picture of people's health. And of course, we want to foster data-driven innovation in the healthcare sector by having simplified user interaction platforms. So for a data-driven national health service, we are talking about this trusted environment for data reuse that endorses our national health service foundational values. There are universal health coverage, quality of care, and financial sustainability. For doing that, we have several key areas for investment, and one of them is actually the legal and the ethical framework. We really believe that the intelligent national health service for the next generation sees data governance as a health service in its own right. And to do so, we really need to leave this old view on digital healthcare systems and have this new integrated view on intelligent healthcare systems that are data-driven by default and that can actually measure results on the basis of what they deliver to people's health. And health data governance has a strong role to play in the intelligent national health service of the future. By realizing that, we partner with Citra, having knowledge of this very good work on the Rulebook for a fair data economy that actually combines the needs for a strong data ecosystem and the core values of the fair data economy that resemble very much the values that underpin national health services. And so we partner to make a Portuguese translation of the Rulebook for the fair data economy, which we did and have been using alongside our strategy as a very important operational tool. And is that experience that I want to share with the audience has an example of how Rulebooks can be used in the context of this public health governmental services and why they are needed. So by having this Portuguese translation, we actually had an organization-wide learning process that allowed us to make sure that there is a strong commitment for all the data-related stakeholders, on the need for having Rulebooks for this new data ecosystem, even among the National Health Service. So it was really an awareness-raising tool, and at the same time provide us easy-to-use tools for action, checklists, templates, and glossaries that are really useful when we are developing data-related operations between the different National Health Service institutions. And not least, but very, very important, or at least, but very, very important, we're able to have this reinforced commitment and reinforce at the same time the public's trust in the use of data for the common good, having strong shared fair data economy values. So the Rulebook gave us tools to have contractual frameworks, general terms and conditions for data sharing, governance models for data ecosystems, and data sets terms of use that were really very valuable in our data-related operations at the National Healthcare Service. And why is it important? Because the Rulebook actually has application to different data sharing purposes. Smaller data ecosystems that need to be built just to as a starting point to build larger data ecosystems to be built on the right way really needs to have strong governance models from the beginning. So the Rulebooks actually provides us common backgrounds for having data sharing best practice since the beginning. At the same time, Rulebooks are in the interface between a policy and an operational document. So they really allow us to expand the concepts, the values that we stress out on data reuse, and do that in operational terms, having practical tools to implement those values. And they also, from the different stakeholders' perspective, they also help you with having this different overview of the very diverse data network components, legal, organizational, and technical, for non-experts. So we are able to talk with the different data sharing stakeholders that are within data ecosystem and provide them a practical tool to understand each other, to start building the ecosystem. So where we are now, we are actually laying the foundations for the digital healthcare systems of the future that are truly intelligent. And how can we use rulebooks to enhance this fair data reuse? First of all, to raise awareness and to use it as a tool in data-related workshops and national discussion forums to make sure health policymakers, health decision makers are aware of the need to have a regulated health data ecosystem and the role of rulebook in that ecosystem. Second, having a translated version really make it sounded like our own, and so it helps us to foster the understanding of good practices and to ensure the larger population, the public, that we have a strong commitment with having a rulebook to support our data-related sharing activities. It also helped us apply these concepts and templates in data sharing agreements, and of course to create this more background framework for an ethical and trustworthy public-private people partnership for data-driven innovations. That's all from my side. Back to you.
Obrigado, Cátia. That was impressive, and there is one sentence that will leave in that you left into my brain. It's for non-experts, and that's an important one, I think. So it's impressive what you did, and it's really important that you also include the non-experts into this work, so that everyone can understand what is done, what has to be done, and what has to be achieved, and what are the agreements behind of this. Thank you so much for your contribution. The next one, and the last one on our stage for this crucial session today, is Sarah Becker from IDSA, the Institute for Digital for Trends. Oh dear Sarah, please excuse, I cannot really pronounce your institute correctly. It's the Institute for Digital Healthcare. Sarah, good to see you. And you're not only co-founder and managing partner there, also board member of the Digital Ethics Advisory Board at Merck. So I'm really curious what you want to tell us about on data ethics.
Hi, Sebastian. Nice to meet you in this virtual format. I'm trying to share my screen first so that we are all set up. Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Full screen, and we can see you, we can hear you, everything set.
Thank you very much for this brief introduction, and thank you very much for inviting me to this session. Especially once we heard what Cátia just said about Portugal and what Marko at the very beginning said, how important rulebooks are in industries like farming. I think we are right now in a very important phase where we have the first data ecosystems running, the first platforms, and we all want to know how we can create true value and value for us as human beings. And this is where we are right now in the center of healthcare, because I think there's a reason why this session is dedicated to healthcare use cases, because healthcare, it has to do with all of us, and we all hope that the data that is so hypersensitive, as I would say, in the healthcare sector will be used in order to create value for all of us. So this is why it is important, especially in the healthcare field, to have trusted trusted digital solutions, trusted products, and they need to be built in a trusted environment. And so far, the session has been focused a bit on legal and technical issues. And today I will just briefly go and show you an example what kind of roles digital ethics play in this field. Yeah, you already introduced me. I'm the managing partner of the Institute for Digital Transformation in Healthcare at University Witten-Herdecke. We are a spin-off of the university, and we are functioning as a research entity. We are involved in huge products, huge research projects, and on the other hand, we function as a consulting capacity, working mainly with DAX companies in order to implement what I will just present to you. Also, I'm the co-founder of Beyond. Beyond is a boutique consulting where we focus just on digital ethics, because we see there's just this rise of and the need that digital ethics play an important role within building robust business models. So I told you, it's not just legal, it's not just technical, it's ethical. And if you see here a few headlines, they are in German, but also in English. In Europe, you can see that there is this digital ethics coming up. And there are companies, huge companies, and other entities that popped up with ethical guidelines, ethical principles. And the question that has been guiding us as an institute is, okay, what does this mean? What are these guidelines? Can they function as standards? Are they somehow homogeneously, or can we learn anything from it? So what we have conducted at the Institute, and I told you we have done this already 1 year ago, because approximately 3 years we are now talking about ethics in healthcare, because there it is extra important due to the hypersensitive data. So we tried to look into healthcare, and what we found were actually 83 ethical guidelines by today. We just updated this study. And we did not really found a lot in healthcare, but we found a lot in other industries. And as you can see here, political institutions, non-profits, which are which is academia or other institutions, are almost half of all those guidelines. And we can also see among the private sector, where industry-specific different telco companies and big tech companies issuing their own ethical guidelines. So in the last 7 years, approximately 83 ethical guidelines came up. And what we wanted to know was, okay, what does it mean? They are all European. Can we see something in there that is homogeneous? Where do they differ, and what can we learn from it in order to get things right about digital ethics? Here in the back, you can see that 31 of those guidelines actually focusing on data, and 69 of them are focusing on artificial intelligence. And there is a lot more. If you're interested, please reach out. There's a lot more to say about this, but we can see that artificial intelligence, when you take a closer look at the guidelines that refer to artificial intelligence, we can actually see that they can be valuable in data settings too, because due to the buzzword artificial intelligence, a lot of them just feel that they have to somehow relate or refer to this, but we have to say that this is not sufficient in order to grasp the idea of the data ecosystem that we are having here in an IDSA context. So what we basically done is we extracted all the values, because we really wanted to know what are the digital ethics? What does it mean? Where are similarities, where differences? And we can see here on the top that of all values that have been named in those guidelines, among the top 10, the 75% of all guidelines name transparency as one of the most important values. There are a few more, and a lot of them you can see, like, for example, the fairness or the privacy or the clear responsibility at the very top, you can see that there are, they somehow have to do with the IDSA infrastructure and the reference architecture model that is already built on these values. But here, they have just been written down and issued by companies not necessarily having IDSA or a technological reference architecture in mind, but they were just filled with principles. And these companies, political institutions and non-profit institutions, they just outlined what is important for them. So in a nutshell, we can say that in Europe, we are very homogeneous considering the values that we find important for us. But the big question that remains open is, how do these values actually, how can they be actually built into the digital solutions and business models that we are pursuing? Because if they really manage this, then we can say that we are having better digital solutions, because they mean something and they actually go beyond what is the technical and the legal framework for a solution. So if you look at this, we have done quite a few projects. I'm just here on the left-hand side, you can see again the guidelines. It depends on if some, for example, industries, companies have their own guidelines already. Actually, right now, we are overseeing a development where we will have some European, on the political level, we will have some developments that there might be some standards coming up in the next couple of months. But so far, we do not have this. So you either need one to start, you either need your own, or you need the European, for example, from the European High-Level Expert Committee, you need some digital ethical guidelines that you use. And we have built, what you can see in the middle, several tools that you can use in order to operationalize, or as we say here in the session, implement digital ethics in various business units, and there in very different settings like new product development. We have this digital ethical risk assessment that helps you to identify risk that goes beyond legal aspects. On the other hand, we have built, for example, a tool that is used if companies buy other companies, and we have implemented a digital ethical due diligence process where you focus on these digital ethical principles in your due diligence process. And as you said before, Sebastian, you can always work with digital ethics boards that help you to ensure, once you have those principles, to have a sound and found governance structure around it. And yeah, there are a few others that you can see here that we have developed in contexts of consulting projects, but that can be used industry-wide in different industries, across different companies, because they are kind of generic. So the case that I brought to you today is the Digital Ethics Checkpoint Framework, as you can see here. And the case study that we have done is that we have an analytics use case, evaluation lifecycle. So there's a company and they do have an analytics center of excellence. And in their analytics center of excellence, they do have large amounts of health data that is already organized in data catalogs. And I would assume that everything they do is already IDSA approved. So we don't have a problem on this layer, the technological layer. Of course, we do not have any issues in terms of legal requirements, because then Europe required have ruled everything out and they have a sound and found data governance structure. But what they want to do in the Analytics Center of Excellence is actually, as I said in the very beginning, create value through the data. So what they actually do is that they have questions they want to be answered with this data, and they have several use cases. And once the use cases are gone through this life cycle, so after, if there's a question, they go into this ideation and planning, and then there's a proof of value for the use case, and then they go into industrialization. On the track, of course, you lose a lot of use cases because they do not stand the proof of value. That is done by key performance indicators, and once they are successful, they go into industrialization. So what actually this company wanted to know is, oh, look at this life cycle. If we are in the phase of industrialization, we put a lot of money in, and it already has third parties involved, and there are really big projects and products being issued to the market, and we don't want any ethical concerns in the end stop us doing what we are doing, but we really want to know if there are any ethical aspects from the very beginning. But we're having a very, very large amount of use cases, so we have to make sure that these ethical evaluation does not take a large amount of work, and we have kind of a system that is embedded, and is the term ethics by design, which is overused, but here it was really the goal to have the ethics implemented and in the design of the process, so that at the very beginning, if you imagine there are a lot of use cases that go into the system, there's these ethical checkpoints that ask, is there an ethical concern? If there is an ethical concern, then how critical is the ethical concern? And in the phase of industrialization, actually, we are really looking deep into the ethical concerns or ethical risks that are there. So from the very beginning, we have a lot of use cases, and we want to limit those use cases down to those that are really going into this phase. And the ethics checkpoint system helps in order to identify digital ethical risk and to make them manageable. And this is very important. It's not to stop something, it's to raise risks, to create awareness about the risk, and then make them manageable for product owners and managers in order to create better digital solutions. So those are integrated into the existing process, as you can see here. And we have developed certain tools that help them, especially a categorization framework that is applied at the very beginning, where we try to categorize the use cases in terms of their ethical concerns. And afterwards, there's a scoring system that actually says, okay, what to do with the use case. Do you have to watch it once it goes in the next phase? Do you have to adapt it in certain areas? So it's really a tool that helps product developers in terms of creating better solutions. Thank you very much.
Perfect in time. I just wanted to interrupt you. So thank you, Sarah, for this amazing talk. So I think this is only a starting point. And so let's use our cool digital tool to keep in touch, to continue the discussion here. So we have our breakout rooms, and we can definitely meet and greet later on and to continue the discussion. Thank you, Sarah, for this great presentation. This is also an important insight. What have we learned from our session today? So the slogan of this IDSA Summit is let's build data spaces. But if you want to build data spaces, there are different aspects that have to be covered. Marko mentioned it. We have the building blocks from the OpenDI paper. We have technology building blocks, but we have also governance building blocks. And how to set up technology building blocks, how to set up a trust angle, a trust infrastructure, is, for example, covered by the IDSA rulebook. It's also covered by the Zitra rulebook. It's a blueprint. So those rulebooks, all those rulebooks support you in your projects to set up your data space, to build data spaces that can then work together, and when participants, where people, where companies roam easily between those different data spaces and can understand what are the basic agreements behind. And this is also a lesson learned that I think that we got, is we have to include the non-experts as well, the domain experts. So we have to build data spaces, but the domains have to fill them with life, and they have to understand what are the rules, what are the agreements, how does this work, what can I do with this data, I mean, something is changing. Our society is changing, and we have to understand this. And this leads exactly to what you presented, Sarah. So what are the ethical guidelines? What is a fundamental ethical fundament of what we do in data spaces? Thanks to all the presenters for this great session, for giving those important insights, for showing to all of us that data sharing in data spaces is not only a question of technology. It's a question of legal aspects, of course. It's a question of operational agreements, and it's also an ethical question. How can we cope with different aspects? So if we want to build data spaces, then let's do it the right way. Do it the right way, and that's where we team up together with the team data spaces, because this playing ground is that large, we cannot cover it alone. So team data spaces, build data spaces, and build it right. Having said this, we'll stop from Studio 2, and I see Christoph smiling at me, and I give back to you, Christoph, I assume, to Studio 1 for the next session.